Every agency wants six-figure clients, and for the longest time, I couldn't figure out how to get them. But there's this one shift that helped me reach that goal. I have had now multiple clients that have been worth $100,000 or more. I'm going to explain to you this one shift that really led to this happening. And I'll give you a hint right now. It was not in my marketing, actually, which is surprising for me, but actually a lot more about retention. So let me explain. I'm going to go through a couple key things. Firstly, how you actually do need to find some of the right clients and what the right clients look like. Secondly, I'm going to explain to you the power of retention, what it actually means to keep clients. Then thirdly, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the actual power of incremental growth and exactly how I reached that six-figure mark with clients, how on average, I used to have deals that were worth anywhere from 10 to 20,000, and now my deals are worth 50 to 100,000. The first part is about client selection. At the end of the day, you cannot have a six-figure client if they can't afford 6 figures worth of services. Having a client that is too broke to even reach that value potentially, if their whole enterprise is worth $20,000 because that's all they have, you're not going to get there because they're not going to give you every last penny they have, and even if they did, you wouldn't get to that mark. So the first step is definitely the fact that you have to learn when to say no to certain kinds of people. The kinds of clients that can be worth 6 figures are going to be clients that are making some kind of money, usually businesses and things like that, that have some kind of money to really pour into a project on repeat. That is ultimately the only type of client that can get you to that mark. And so you have to learn to say no to people that aren't there, and you have to also learn to do a good enough service so that the people who do have those kinds of resources would still pick you. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that the standards of the service that somebody expects when they're paying you much more money is a lot higher. And so your services need to be on standard with what they want. The reality is some people need to improve their standards first. And this is hard to admit because it's basically looking at your own service and realizing you're not as good as you thought you were. But if I'm really honest, when I started, I wasn't as good as I thought I was. At the end of the day, it was still my first few repetitions. It was still my first few projects. I was still learning. It's not going to be the best thing ever. And the reality is I had lower ticket clients because I wasn't ready to take on the higher ticket. And that's completely fine. Keep practicing, get more practice in and become better. Make every single project better than the last. That's how you get better. And eventually those six-figure clients will look at your work and say, oh, that's actually quite good. I want this guy to take my money and to do my service. This leads to the second point about retention. Why am I talking about retention and not some magical shift in marketing that started bringing all these clients through the door? Marketing is hard. I didn't do enough of it. An offer is really what makes your marketing work like magic. Now, until then, it can be really, really hard to get loads of clients through the door, very high quality clients and things like that. But for the clients that you do have in your office, the clients that have already come through the door, you can make a service that's really, really good for them and just try and take as much care of them as possible. And in time, that's how they accumulate to be worth a lot of money, even if you don't have loads of them walking in the door all the time. That is how you get to that six-figure client mark without needing loads of marketing and loads of paid ads or something like that. Because honestly, it's really hard to get the marketing fully right when you're still cracking your offer, which is my case actually. I'm very transparent about that. I have a software agency and we do software development, especially focused on AI because we're starting to prototype some products internally, but we still are fundamentally quite a commodity business. We sell development services, which are quite commoditized, but we're working very much on finding an offer. But in the meantime, the place where we can make a lot of money is in retention. No client will walk through the door wanting to give you 6 figures. This barely happens. But let me tell you something really funny. Starbucks has an average customer lifetime value of $14,000. The average Starbucks customer over the course of their life spends $14,000 at Starbucks. It's insane. When you walk into Starbucks, you're not thinking that you're going to spend $14,000 in there. You're thinking you're going to spend $14, maybe. But if you think about it, that's because their customers just keep coming back. They went there for coffee once and they thought it was good, and so they just went back again and again and again. And over time, that adds up into an insane amount. First, it's $100, then it's $1,000, then it's $10,000. You never go in imagining you're going to spend $10,000 on coffee, but over time, it racks up. The same logic applies in your own agency, which is it is not the fact that a client is not willing to spend 6 figures. It's that they do this over time, and eventually it gets there. The small numbers add up. 5 grand at a time, 10 grand at a time, 15 grand at a time, whatever. But over the course of months, this adds up into some very high numbers. That is the power of retention. And when you learn to keep clients, you can make basically a lot more money off of them and you can help them a lot more. You provide loads more value, and so they also stay with you and continue to pay you. High customer lifetime value or high value customers are not based on singular, ridiculously expensive interactions. They are mostly based on very consistently repeated interactions where a customer trusts you a lot. And because you have their trust, they will give you their money because you always give them that value back. So it really just becomes about, can you always make sure to return the value that you Promise. A lot of the ways to do that also, actually, I'll give you a little tip here, but when you're running an agency and things like that, half of the value is in the communication. The service can be 10 times better by you just communicating 10 times more and responding faster and trying to send more updates, like keep them in the loop on things, tell them exactly when they're going to hear from you, what they're going to hear from you. For me, that looks like a Notion page where we have everything about the project and weekly updates and sometimes meeting notes as well. All of this stuff provides a really holistic overview of everything that's going on, and at any point they can check that document, they can see what we did in week 1, week 2, week 10, week 30, whatever. That was a big upgrade in terms of the client experience that I did, and I didn't realize how much of a massive difference that made. I hired other agencies in the past and had terrible experiences, and I started to realize, oh, this is a really big issue. It's in the communication, it's in the updates. And if you over communicate, that's one of the great ways to upgrade your service without having to fulfill way more hours or anything like that. Client retention is an attention to the detail. If you pay attention to the detail and you take care of that client as much as you can, then I promise you, I think you will really start to be able to keep your clients for longer. And that is how you get insane customer lifetime value. This starts to go into my last point, which is really just the power of the incremental growth. Oftentimes, if you see potential in a client, it's worth sticking it out with them to try and see if they upgrade. There was a client of mine who actually started on a $1.5 grand retainer. That was my lowest retainer at the time, and it was a bit of a pain. They came from a kind of personal referral and whatever, and so I took them on, and the work was actually really annoying. For $1.5 grand, it wasn't a very profitable deal. It took a lot of hours for relatively little money. Then I told them, listen, I can't keep doing this for 1.5. I'm going to bump you to 2.5, or I have to drop you. They said yes. So okay, we bumped a little bit, and again, we did this over the course of several months. They reached something like $10,000 to $15,000 worth of lifetime value with these small retainers. And then they had a big project that they wanted to do. And guess who they came to first? It was to us, because we had helped them do a lot of this small stuff and we had built trust with them. And so then they engaged with us in a much bigger retainer, and they came to be worth over 6 figures. And so that was a project that I think is a really great case study of just how one step at a time, you build trust, you build trust, you build trust. And then eventually when they have something big to give you, they'll give it to you because they trust you. I don't sell to enterprise personally. Like, I don't sell to Google and Amazon and these massive companies of the world because I don't understand them. But I have seen a handful of people who do. And from what I have seen, they always start by giving you something small, and then they give you a little bit more, and then they give you a little bit more, and then eventually they leave you with repeated work every year that's worth millions because they're massive, massive billion-dollar companies. But the point is, they don't go in with the idea of giving you millions. They go in with a couple $100,000. That for them is a small project. But the same logic applies when you're doing smaller ticket, when you're doing bigger ticket, when you're selling to enterprise. I think it's just from what I have observed from kind of my entrepreneur friends, but it's in the incremental stuff. Slowly but surely, things add up. You run a marathon one step at a time. The same thing happens with lifetime value. Just keep that in mind. This has happened to a handful of clients. There's also been a client that they worked with us for maybe 6 months or so. It was a good deal and whatever, and they finished their service and we closed up the project because they got what they needed. And a year later, they came back, they wanted more, and they worked with us for something like 9 months. And so again, that customer eventually became over 6 figures because there was trust established. They came back to us when they needed more. That is really how you generate very high lifetime value. I hope this gives you a lesson of how to grow without necessarily doing insane marketing and things like that. There is a lot of money to be made in retention, and a lot of people don't think about that. And especially when you don't have a perfect offer, when you don't have great marketing, retention is a way that you can grow your business without figuring out everything about marketing. Marketing will take time to figure out, and you need to spend time doing it. I'm not saying that you make a huge business without marketing. You absolutely need to do it, and you need to do it more, but figuring it out takes time. While you're trying to figure it out, if you want to make more money and still grow, when you don't have great marketing, when you don't have a great offer, retain the clients that you do have and treat them the best you possibly can, and essentially grow the business so that you then have more money to invest into marketing to try more things. I speak from experience. That helped me a lot. I'm glad that I kind of learned that. That's a wrap on this video. I've got to head up to a little conference that I'm doing. Leave any questions if you have them. I'll reply to as many as possible as usual.